one of the most common investments, not just in the United States, but really in the entire world, is something that's called U.S. Treasuries. We've all heard of them, but a lot of us don't know much about them. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you what you need to know about U.S. Treasuries. First off, what is a U.S. Treasury? It's debt that's issued by the United States government. And from a default standpoint, from the likelihood of getting back your money standpoint, there's probably no more secure investment than U.S. government treasuries. And the reason for that is the United States government owns the printing presses. So the risk of us not getting our money back is very, very low. Now, yes, recently there's been some debacles in Congress about passing the United States debt ceiling. But you know what? That's nothing new. That's been going on since the 1960s. And believe it or not, there's been almost 80 times that this debate has come up, that there's been stalemates, that the fear of the U.S. government not increasing its debt limit was looming. So it's happened almost 80 times since the 1960s, and yet the U.S. government has never defaulted on its debt. The risks are so high for the government to do that. Even if they were to do that, you would eventually get back, in my opinion, and I don't know. This is not financial advice, and I'm not the president of the United States. I'm not in Congress, but I think you're going to get back your money. So from a default risk standpoint, United States Treasuries are likely the safest investment that you can have. Okay, but that's not the only risk with U.S. issued debt. And it's critically important that people realize, that we all realize, that there is a significant risk associated with particularly the longer duration, the 10-year, the 20-year, the 7-year, the 10-year bonds, notes that the U.S. government issues. So stay to the end because I'm going to talk about that. But first I want to go through the basics. So we talked about what U.S. issued debt is, and I've used the term treasuries, I've used the term notes, and I've used the term bonds. And those are all different things. They're all debt issued by the U.S. government, but they're different things. So treasuries are debt issued by the U.S. government that's less than a year in maturity. So under a year, and you can buy those in durations of 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 13 weeks, 17 weeks, 26, and 52 weeks. The next term I used was notes. And so that is for U.S. issued debt that's 10 years in maturity or less. It starts at 2 years, so from 2 to 10 years. And the durations of those, the maturities, you can buy U.S. notes that mature in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years. And then finally, you heard me talk about bonds. So U.S. bonds, again, it's debt issued by the United States government, but this is for 20 years and for 30 years. So that's the difference between the treasuries, the notes, and the bonds. Again, because the treasury bills are under a year in duration, that's probably some of the lowest risk investments that you can make, right? There's even risk if you put your money under the mattress. Well, there's risk that somebody comes and steals stuff from your house and finds that money. So there's risk associated with everything. But this is about as low risk as you can get. Okay, the next thing I think it's important for us to talk about is when do you get your interest on this U.S. government debt. Now, if you buy a treasury debt that the U.S. government's going to pay you back within the year, you're not going to receive any interest payments along the way. So what you do in that case is you're buying the treasury at a discount. Let's say the going rate is, just for sake of argument, about 5%. So instead of buying $1,000 or let's say a $10,000 treasury bill for $10,000, you're going to pay $9,500 for that. And in a year, you're going to get back the full $10,000. So the interest is paid when the Treasury matures. In this case, the $9,500 getting back $500 on that. It seems like the interest would be 5%. It's close. It's about 5.25%. Okay, so that's how it works with the bills. But how does it work with the notes and the bonds? There you're getting your interest every 6 months, right? You wouldn't want to wait 30 years until you got your interest. Okay, now remember, with these longer dated tools, even, 5, 10, 20, 30-year bonds, those are risky. And stay to the end, and I'll share with you why those are risky. And those can be quite risky. Okay, the next question is, how do you buy treasuries? How do you buy T-bills, notes, and bonds? And you have a couple choices. The U.S. government actually has a website, and you can find that at treasurydirect.gov, G-O-V. I'll leave the link in the show notes. The nice thing about buying it direct is you have a wide assortment of the tools that you can invest in, whether it's a treasury. Remember the list of the different durations that I shared for treasuries, which are the things that mature under a year, right? The 4-week, the 8-week, 13, 17, 26, 52. You can buy all of those on Treasury Direct. Treasury Direct also has a low minimum. It's $100. The negative is Treasury Direct is a government bureaucracy, right? So if you have any questions, if you need help and you need to call their helpline, people have reported waiting on hold for a half hour or an hour in order to get help. And also as a government bureaucracy, sometimes they have funny rules. Sometimes when you add a second or a third bank account where you can transfer money back and forth, the website will say, you actually need to mail in a physical form and your bank needs to physically sign this form. And, that's not a lot of fun to go through all that hassle. So one way is treasurydirect.gov. Another is to use your custodian, places like Charles Schwab, Fidelity, or Vanguard. The disadvantages there is the minimums tend to be a little higher. It tends to be $1,000 depending on your custodian. And you tend to have less of a selection choice. You probably won't be able to buy all of those treasury bills, the 4, 8, 26, 17 week. You'll be able to buy some of them, but not all of them. Let's see what else we have here. Another disadvantage with treasurydirect.gov is you cannot use what's called the tax advantage account, a regular IRA, a Roth IRA. It's got to be a taxable account. With custodians, typically you can use a tax-deferred account, a tax benefited account like an IRA. So, which brings up another point. How are treasuries taxed? And the nice thing is you do not pay state tax and you do not pay local tax on this interest that you're receiving. You do pay federal tax, but like in my state, I have a state income tax. I don't have a local income tax. So for the treasuries I buy, I don't have to worry about paying tax. Okay, and now I want to talk about that big risk that's super important for all of us to understand. So there's the risk that you don't get paid back your money. But there's also the risk that in the future, interest rates are higher and your money is locked in at a low interest rate. So as I record this, the interest rate on a 10-year treasury note is about 4.5%. But if interest rates were to go up to 6%, right, people are not going to want my 4.5% note, but I'm locked in on this treasury. I can sell it on the open market, but people aren't going to pay me the higher price. It's called duration risk, and it can be quite significant. So for a 10-year treasury, it's called duration risk. You probably lose about 8% for every 1% that interest rates rise right after you buy your bond. So in my case, if interest rates were 1.5% higher, I'd probably lose 10% of the value of that treasury note if I had to sell it right now. About 10%, 10, 12% is what I would expect in theory for that to go down. But if you hold it until maturity, you will get back that full amount that you put into that treasury note. It may not be worth as much in real dollars as when you initially made that investment. So that tends to be a super important risk. I wanted you to know about that. I also want you to know about another thing, right? We're saving this money. We're putting money aside for maybe buying a house or preparing for retirement. And on the topic of retirement, I've done another video that's got almost 1 million views. It's called 5 Reasons to Retire as Soon as You Can. The financial aspects of this are important, but also the end goal about finally retiring. So I'll see you in there. Bye-bye.